You can't do this, I screamed, my hands shaking as I held the acceptance letter. That scholarship is mine. Watch your tone with me, Mom snapped back. Your brother deserves this opportunity more than you ever will. Where's my passport? My voice cracked. Where did you hide it? Somewhere you'll never find it, she said coldly. The deadline is tomorrow. Accept it, Mireille. Mom hid my passport, so her son could take my place in a scholarship abroad. Hi, I'm Mireille. Today I'm going to tell you my story. But before I continue, please like, share, and subscribe to hear more stories like this. Growing up, I always knew my mother favored my younger brother Dylan. While I worked 2 jobs to pay for my college tuition, she bought him a new car for his 18th birthday. When I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in international business, she barely acknowledged it. But when Dylan scraped by with a C average in communications, she threw him a party that cost more than my entire semester's expenses. Despite the obvious favoritism, I never let it break me. I had bigger dreams. For 3 years, I'd been working toward one goal: the prestigious Morrison Fellowship for International Development. It was a 2-year program in Switzerland that included full tuition for a master's degree, living expenses, and guaranteed placement with the UN afterward. Only 5 students from the entire country were selected each year. I'd started preparing in my sophomore year. While my classmates partied, I studied. I learned French and German, volunteered with 3 different international NGOs, maintained a perfect GPA, and wrote a thesis on sustainable development that my professor called graduate-level work. Every sacrifice, every late night, every missed social event, it was all for this. The day the acceptance email arrived, I was at my second job, tutoring kids at the community center. My hands trembled as I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't dreaming. I'd done it. I was one of the 5. I rushed home, bursting with excitement. Mom was in the kitchen with Dylan, helping him fill out job applications. Again. He'd been unemployed for 6 months since dropping out of his master's program. I got it, I announced, holding up my phone. The Morrison Fellowship. I'm going to Switzerland. Dylan looked up, confused. Mom's face went through several expressions: surprise, calculation, then something darker. What fellowship? Dylan asked. The one I've been working toward for 3 years, I said, my excitement dimming at their lack of enthusiasm. When do you leave? Mom asked, her voice oddly flat. 3 months. I need to get my visa sorted, buy my plane ticket, and... 3 months, she repeated, glancing at Dylan. That's wonderful, dear. But it wasn't wonderful to her. I could see it in her eyes. That night I heard them talking in hushed voices. I couldn't make out the words, but Dylan kept saying unfair and opportunity, while Mom murmured agreement. The next few weeks were strange. Mom suddenly became very interested in my fellowship, asking detailed questions about the application process, the requirements, the contacts at the Morrison Foundation. She even asked to see my acceptance letter and all the correspondence. Foolishly, I thought she was finally taking pride in my achievement. Dylan started hanging around more too, asking about Switzerland, about the program structure, about what kind of careers it could lead to. He'd never shown interest in my academic pursuits before. Then things started disappearing. First, it was small, my favorite pen, the one I'd used to sign my application. Then my copies of recommendation letters went missing from my desk. I thought I was being careless, stressed about the upcoming move. 2 weeks before the final documentation deadline, I went to get my passport from my filing cabinet. It wasn't there. I tore apart my room, my car, my locker at work. Nothing. Mom, have you seen my passport? I asked that evening. She didn't look up from her magazine. No, dear. You should keep better track of your things. The next morning I caught Dylan in my room. What are you doing? I demanded. He jumped, shoving something into his pocket. Just looking for a pen. Get out! But the damage was done. Whatever he'd been looking for, he'd found it. That afternoon I noticed my laptop had been used. The browser history showed someone had accessed my email, specifically the correspondence with the Morrison Foundation. I confronted Mom immediately. Someone's been in my email. Don't be paranoid, Mireille. Why would anyone care about your emails? But I knew. The pieces were falling into place. The questions, the missing documents, Dylan's sudden interest in international development, despite failing his one international relations course. I spent the next week searching everywhere for my passport. I filed a report with the police, but they said without evidence of theft, I'd need to simply apply for a replacement. The problem was, a new passport would take 6 to 8 weeks. The deadline was in 5 days. 3 days before the deadline, I came home to find Mom and Dylan in the living room with someone I didn't recognize, a woman in a suit. "Mireille," Mom said smoothly, "this is Miss Chen from the Morrison Foundation. She's here about the fellowship." My blood ran cold. "What?" Miss Chen looked confused. "I'm sorry, I think there's some confusion. I'm here to meet Dylan about his acceptance." "His what?" The room spun. "The Morrison Fellowship," she said slowly. "Dylan was accepted last week. We were surprised since his sister was also a strong candidate, but his application was exceptionally compelling." "That's impossible," I said, my voice shaking. "He never applied. He doesn't even have the prerequisites." Miss Chen frowned. "I have his application right here. Transcripts, recommendations, even a thesis on sustainable development." My thesis, my recommendations, my entire application with Dylan's name slapped on top. "Those are mine," I said desperately. "Check the metadata on the thesis file. Check with my professors. Professor Williams wrote that recommendation for me, not him." Mom stood up. "Mireille, stop this. You're embarrassing yourself." "I'm embarrassing myself? You stole my future." Miss Chen looked deeply uncomfortable. "I think I should go. This is clearly a family matter." "Wait." I pulled out my phone, showing her emails. "Look, here's my correspondence with your office. Here's my acceptance email from 2 months ago." She examined them carefully, her frown deepening. "This is highly irregular. I need to make some calls." After she left, the confrontation exploded. "You can't do this!" I screamed, my hands shaking as I held the acceptance letter. "That scholarship is mine." "Watch your tone with me," Mom snapped back. "Your brother deserves this opportunity more than you ever will." "Where's my passport?" My voice cracked. "Where did you hide it?" "Somewhere you'll never find it," she said coldly. "The deadline is tomorrow. Accept it, Mireille." Dylan at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Mom, maybe we should—" "Quiet," she snapped at him. "Do you want to work minimum wage forever? This is your chance to make something of yourself." "By stealing from me?" I turned to him. "Dylan, please, you know this is wrong." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "You always get everything. Perfect grades, scholarships, praise. Maybe it's my turn." "Your turn? I worked for this?" "Well, now I have it," he said quietly. "And there's nothing you can do about it." I spent that night calling everyone I could think of. The passport office was closed. The police said it was a civil matter. My academic advisor was sympathetic but said without proof, her hands were tied. The next morning, the deadline day, I made one last desperate attempt. I searched Mom's room while she was at her weekly hair appointment. Nothing in the obvious places. But then I remembered. She had a safety deposit box at the bank. She'd mentioned it once, years ago. I didn't have the key, but I had something else. Her recent bank statements from the mail. I called the bank, impersonating her, saying I'd lost my key and needed access for important documents. They said I'd need to come in person with ID. It was a long shot, but I was desperate. I grabbed her expired driver's license from the junk drawer. We looked similar enough, especially with the grainy photo. My hands shook as I presented it at the bank, but the teller barely glanced at it before leading me to the boxes. There it was, my passport, along with Dylan's freshly expedited one. He must have applied recently for the trip. I took both. I submitted my documentation with 2 hours to spare, attaching a lengthy explanation about the attempted fraud and Miss Chen's visit. Then I called Professor Williams and my other recommenders, explaining the situation. They were horrified and immediately contacted the Morrison Foundation to verify that their letters were for me, not Dylan. The next week was tense. Mom realized the passports were gone and unleashed fury like I'd never seen. She called me every name imaginable, said I was destroying my brother's future, that I was selfish and cruel. "You had no right," she screamed. "I had every right. It's my scholarship, my passport, my life." She threw me out that night. I moved in with my friend Sarah, sleeping on her couch while waiting for the foundation's response. It came 2 weeks later. After investigating, they'd discovered the fraud. Dylan's application was rejected, and mine was reinstated. But they also warned that they took attempted fraud very seriously and would be noting this in their records, effectively blacklisting Dylan from ever applying again. The fallout was swift. Mom called me crying, begging me to fix it, to tell them it was a misunderstanding. "You've ruined his life. He ruined his own life by trying to steal mine," I replied, and hung up. But the consequences didn't stop there. Miss Chen, horrified by what had happened, had mentioned it to colleagues. Word spread through the small world of international development organizations. Dylan found himself informally blacklisted from not just the Morrison Foundation, but several other prestigious programs. Worse for him, when he tried to apply for regular jobs, employers would Google him and find a blog post written by one of my professors about academic fraud and identity theft in scholarship applications. While it didn't name him directly, anyone who knew the situation could connect the dots. 3 months later, I was in Switzerland, starting my new life. The program was everything I'd dreamed of and more. I threw myself into my studies, internships, and networking. My classmates came from all over the world, brilliant, driven people who'd earned their spots through merit. We worked on real projects, consulted for actual UN initiatives, and learned from experts who shaped global policy. Meanwhile, back home, Dylan's life spiraled. Unable to find work in his field, he took a job at a call center. The same entitlement that made him think he deserved my scholarship made him a terrible employee. He was fired after 3 months for arguing with supervisors about why he shouldn't have to follow call scripts. He thought he was too smart for such menial requirements. Then fired from a retail job for the same reason. Mom, having burned bridges with me, poured all her energy into supporting Dylan. She paid his bills, made excuses for him, enabled every bad decision. She'd call relatives with elaborate stories about how Dylan was between opportunities and how the system was rigged against him. But even her patience had limits. When he wrecked the car she'd bought him while driving without insurance, he'd let it lapse to spend the money on video games. She finally snapped. I heard about it from my aunt. Mom had given Dylan an ultimatum: get a job and keep it for 6 months, or get out. He'd chosen to get out, moving in with some friends who quickly tired of him not paying rent. Within 2 months, they kicked him out too. The last I heard, he was working at a fast food restaurant, the same one where he'd mocked a former classmate for working during college. His manager was that same classmate. His girlfriend left him when she realized he'd never amount to anything, tired of his constant complaints about how his sister had sabotaged his future. His friends distanced themselves as his bitter complaints about unfairness and stolen opportunities became unbearable. Mom tried to reach out to me once, 18 months into my program. She sent a long email about how she was sorry, how she'd only wanted what was best for both her children, how Dylan was struggling, and could I possibly help him find something in my field? She mentioned she was having health problems, stress-related, she said, and how nice it would be if both her children could reconcile. I didn't reply, but I did hear from my cousin that Mom had started therapy after her doctor suggested her health issues were stress-related. Too little, too late, in my opinion. 2 years later, I graduated from the Morrison Fellowship with honors. The UN placement materialized as promised, a position with UNESCO working on education initiatives in developing countries. At my graduation ceremony, I thought about inviting my family, but decided against it. This achievement was mine alone, untainted by their presence. It was meaningful work, the kind Dylan could never have done even if he'd stolen my spot, because it required not just credentials, but genuine passion and competence. My first assignment took me to Kenya, where I helped design curriculum for rural schools. Then to Bangladesh, working on girls' education initiatives. Each project built on the last, and I found myself becoming an expert in my field. I built a life in Geneva, made friends from every continent, dated a fellow UN worker from France, traveled to places I'd only dreamed about. My apartment had a view of Lake Geneva, and I often sat on my balcony, remembering the girl who'd worked 2 jobs just to pay for textbooks. My success wasn't about revenge or proving anything to my family. It was about living the life I'd earned through my own merit. The irony is, If Dylan had put half the energy he'd spent trying to steal my achievements into building his own, he might have made something of himself. If Mom had pushed him to work hard instead of enabling his entitlement, he might have found his own path. But they chose the easy way, the dishonest way, and it cost them everything. Last Christmas, my aunt sent me an update. Dylan was still struggling, now in his 30s, still blaming everyone else for his failures. He'd been arrested for shoplifting. Nothing major, just some electronics he'd tried to resell online. The charges were dropped, but it made the local news. His mugshot circulated on social media, and several of his high school classmates who'd achieved success shared it with comments about karma. One wrote, "Remember when he said retail workers were losers? Look who's stealing from them now." Mom had finally cut him off financially after he'd stolen from her purse one too many times. The final straw was when she discovered he'd taken her credit card and run up thousands in debt buying gaming equipment and subscriptions to dating apps, where he lied about having a successful career in international development. My career. She lived alone now, bitter about how both her children had abandoned her, unable to see her own role in creating this situation. My aunt mentioned that several family members had stopped visiting Mom because all she did was complain about her ungrateful children. The extended family had their own opinions. My grandmother, who'd always seen through Mom's favoritism, left me a voicemail saying she was proud of me for standing up for myself. "Your mother made her bed," she said. "Now she's lying in it, wondering why it's so cold and empty." Even Dylan's few remaining friends had given up on him. One reached out to me through social media to apologize for believing his version of events. "He told us you sabotaged him," the message read. "But then we saw him try to take credit for other people's work at every job. We realized you were telling the truth all along." Sometimes I wonder if things could have been different. If Mom had loved us equally, if Dylan had been pushed to achieve on his own, if they'd celebrated my success instead of trying to steal it. But then I remember that moment, my mother coldly telling me my brother deserved my opportunity more than I ever would. And I know there was no other way this could have ended. Success isn't just about achieving your goals. It's about achieving them with integrity, knowing that every accomplishment truly belongs to you. Dylan will never have that satisfaction. He'll always be the man who tried to steal his sister's future and lost everything in the process. As for me, I'm living proof that when someone tries to dim your light, sometimes the best response is to shine even brighter. I earned my place in this world, and no one, not even family, could take that away from me. The scholarship they tried to steal wasn't just a piece of paper or a ticket to Switzerland. It was recognition of years of hard work, sacrifice, and dedication. When they tried to take it, they revealed who they really were. And in doing so, they freed me from the obligation to care about people who never truly cared about me. That's the thing about entitlement. It blinds you to your own potential while making you covet others' achievements. Dylan learned that the hard way. And Mom? She learned that when you sacrifice one child for another, you often end up losing both. Recently, I received a promotion at UNESCO, leading a team of 20 professionals. My salary now exceeds what Dylan and Mom ever dreamed of combined. But more than money, it's the impact that matters. Last month, our education programs reached their 1,000,000th student. That's 1,000,000 children whose lives are better because I fought for my place in this world. Dylan, meanwhile, was let go from the fast food job after customer complaints. The universe has a way of serving justice. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and standing up for what you've rightfully earned? What did you decide, and do you still stand by that choice today?